Welcome back to the Oscar Project Podcast, the show where I discuss Oscar-nominated films year by year. I am your host, Jonathan Eichelberg, and today is the second episode of my preview to the 97th Academy Awards. I'm joined by director Enrico Banson from the Director's Notes newsletter, and today we will be discussing several categories, including Best Animated Feature, Best International Feature, Best Documentary Feature, and both music categories. If you missed yesterday's episode where I covered the technical categories, you can find them in this feed. And don't forget to leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify to help more movie lovers find the show. Enrico, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
So folks might recognize your last name from one of my previous guests, Maria Banson, who's of course your wife.
Yes.
Tell the listeners about yourself and your work. What do you do?
Well, I am a filmmaker and a theater director based in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I've done too many indie films, and my wife, Maria Banson, has gotten me into the Substack thing. So I'm just starting my Substack journey, which has been amazing. It's a lot. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, I mostly do here in the Bay Area. We do a lot of post-production work and a lot of commercials. So that's sort of my bread and butter. But I've made some indie films, and I'm currently directing some theater productions here in the Bay Area, and I'm working on writing some stuff with my sister. We're both WGA, so it's exciting what 2025 has to offer.
Fantastic. Well, can't wait to see more of your work.
Yeah.
So we have a bunch of categories to get through today. We want to start things off with the Best Animated Feature Film. And we have 5 nominees in that category. We have Flow, Inside Out 2, Memoir of a Snail, Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Fowl, and The Wild Robot. So what are your first thoughts when looking at those nominees for animation feature?
I think these were the 5 best, and they were out of the ones that I've seen in last year. I was very moved by The Wild Robot, but then I think I'm biased because I read the book, and I read the book out of just loving the premise of the story. And I think maybe because I did see all 5, but I think the reason why The Wild Robot was resonant is I actually took my mother to see it.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like cinematically, it was also a lot of fun. And I knew in reading the book that it was going to deal with parental themes, and I just kind of wanted to experience that with my mother. So there was that's what cinema is, right?
Right,
You
yeah.
connect with people because you bring them. So I have to say, The Wild Robot is not only is it an emotionally resonant film, but I also thought it was beautifully animated.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there are similarities with the visual aesthetics of Flow and The Wild Robot, I think, that are beautiful. But I also have to hand it, to Inside Out too for dealing with some interesting topics there. And especially I work with the Youth Cinema Project. So I know how and I teach a lot of elementary and middle school kids. And I know that Inside Out 2 was very helpful for them in understanding some of the things that they're going through mentally, So I think also I love how that was important for a lot of people. And I love Wallace and Gromit. I've always loved them. I think there were 5 great films. I think if there was to be the one that would be my least favorite, but it was still very good, was Memoir of a Snail.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said on those. The Wild Robot was actually my number 2 film of the year, period, full stop.
Yeah.
I went with my wife and my kids and my eldest son, and I had both read the book. And so we kind of knew what we were getting into, but the rest of the family didn't. And of course, my wife and I are sitting there, looking at each other like, oh my God, it's so sad. But, and of course, my oldest son is 15, so he's getting to the point where he's going to be going off and going on his own
For
journey
sure.
in life. So it kind of hit us there as well.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
But yeah, and I agree. Flow, I actually just saw Flow the other day, now that it's on Max, and I watched that with my youngest son, and we kind of, because it's no dialogue, I say no sound, but obviously it's a beautifully soundtracked, both sound design and music wise.
Yeah.
But we kind of watched it and we were kind of making up our own stories as we went along. Hey, what's the bird gonna do? What's the cat gonna do? Kind of thing. So it's a fun thing there. I like Wallace and Gromit you can never go wrong with those guys. They're hilarious. And obviously I was looking back, they've won, I think at least 1 or 2 of their shorts have won the short animated feature or short animated short film. And then they've been, I think pretty much all of the Wallace and Gromits have been nominated in either animated feature or animated short. So they've got a good track record there. Inside Out 2, can't go wrong with that. Obviously, it has a huge, very high bar to live up to with the first film.
Yeah, the first one, yeah.
And that was another one where, again, that came out almost 10 years ago now. Our kids were much younger then, and I think I've told this in various forums before when we took our kids to see that one at the drive-in,
Oh, cool.
and they're kind of just sitting at the back, and we got to that scene with Bing Bong,
Oh
and
gosh.
my wife and I are bawling in the back of the van, and they're just like, "Oh, that's a cute, fun story." But yeah, I think Inside Out 2, I think it did some really good things with that,
Yeah.
but again, it's just such
I
a
mean, yeah,
high
you're
bar
right.
to live up
It's a
to.
high bar,
Yeah,
you know? And I think we walked into that going, "Okay, I don't think you'll ever top that first one," you know what I mean? But thankfully, there were some fascinating characters, new
right.
characters, especially, Anxiety,
Yeah.
which
Yeah, it definitely speaks to, a lot of what kids are dealing with in society these days, so it's very poignant there. But yeah, I agree. I think Wild Robot is my favorite out of this group. I think it's gonna win. It's beautiful to look at. Its
Mhm.
voice cast is excellent. Yeah, it's almost a perfect movie for me.
And I know we're gonna talk about it a little later on down the line, but I think also musically,
Yeah.
it's a great film. So, yeah, I agree with you, and I hope it wins 'cause it was a lot of fun. Yeah, and emotional,
Yeah, and that's I feel like with these, a lot of times it's the one that really pulls at your heartstrings that gets the votes here. And obviously, it was probably between Inside Out 2 and Wild Robot are probably the most promoted, marketed
Mhm.
films out of this group. So obviously they've got the biggest kind of push from studios and things like that. But agreed with your initial sentiment. There's no wrong choice in this group, I don't think.
I don't think so either, yeah, and if there will be an upset, it might be Flow.
Yeah. Yep, agreed. And I guess that brings us to best international feature, and
Yeah.
obviously Flow landed there as well. The full
Yes.
list is Emilia Pérez from France, Flow from Latvia, The Girl with the Needle from Denmark, I'm Still Here from Brazil, and The Seed of the Sacred Fig from Germany.
Yes.
I love seeing Flow land in this category too.
Me
I
too.
feel like we don't get a lot of animated films in this international feature. It's always kind of the more
Yeah.
serious, international pieces that we see further
Yeah.
down in this list. But I'm really glad to see it get nominated here.
I have to admit, like, out of all of that 5, and I was thankful. I mean, I just finally saw Seed of the Sacred Fig. I loved I Was Still Here. When my wife and I went to it, I think she was a little bit more lukewarm to it, but I think out of that 5, and I love Flow, but I'm Still Here was I think the more interesting, fascinating film, and I walked out of there thinking, "Oh, this is" well, one, a story I knew of, but I didn't know the details
Right.
of,
Yeah.
and also the performances were great. So on my vote here is I'm Still Here. I don't know if they're gonna win, but then again, you don't know with what's going on with Emilia Perez. I don't know, right? I mean, I think for the longest time, Emilia Perez was sort of the front runner, but in terms of the voting window and what's happening, I don't know how much that will actually affect. That's what's gonna be a fascinating watch. The award season this just for like, all of us, it's all of us, it's that Michael Jackson. We're gonna be the Michael Jackson meme with the popcorn and he's going, "What's gonna happen? Whatever this title is named," you know?
Yeah, and we're gonna hear it all night. It's got nominations
Yeah.
in more than half the categories, so we're gonna be hearing it all night. I think for me, I'm Still Here. I feel like it's kind of like a dark horse in this category because
Mm.
obviously it's got the Best Picture nomination, it's got the Best Actress nomination. I doubt that it's going to win in either of those two. So I wonder
Yeah.
if people are going to say it's not going to win there, so let's vote for it here, and that might push it over, especially with everything going on with Emilia Perez.
Yeah, I think so too. The Girl with the Needle was a tough watch, but it was a great film. I mean, it was a beautiful film, but it was a tough watch.
Yeah, I watched the first maybe about 20 minutes of that. I haven't finished that one, but very intriguing and definitely is on my list to finish as soon as possible, hopefully before the ceremony.
Yeah, no, but I think these 5 are I mean, these 4 are strong, I think, and it's funny because my wife and I, Maria and I, popped on Amelia Perez again while we were doing spring cleaning, and it's interesting how a lot of the things that we caught to it the second time around was like, "Oh, yeah, okay, this is problem,"
Yeah.
you know? I think the first time around when we saw it, we were like, "Oh, this is really interesting film," and a lot of things are going on to it, and there was a lot of really just showy things, but then once you sort of peeled the veneer of it and you go, "Oh, huh, there's some really, really odd and actually, in my opinion, terrible choices." I think that song in the vaginoplasty song is it's just I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, yeah. There is some there. I mean, there's definitely some really strong ones, and obviously we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to best original song. But there are some ones that I was just kind of like, yeah, not sure about
Yeah,
that.
why is this here? Yeah.
I mean, it definitely you got to give it credit. It definitely was taking chances and swinging for the fences in some cases.
That's
But
what it is, yeah, you have that's what you have to kinda give it credit
yeah,
for at the very, 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 very base bottom there, yeah.
yeah, and I think I mean it's I was in a way glad that it landed on a service like Netflix so that it is widely available and people can check it out. And
Yeah.
obviously, it's not going to be for probably 80 to 90% of people who are watching it, but it will. It's there. It's going to show up on those recommended lists, so people are going to at least put it on and watch the first
Yeah.
5-10 minutes and figure out if they want to watch the rest of it.
And it's really interesting because I had my little sister, she loathes this film the first time she saw it, and she's a wonder she works in the music industry, and she's so well spoken about art and everything. But it was funny because at the end of the conversation, her partner and my sister and me were like, "At least you have to admit that great art, good or bad art, lends itself to great discussion." And I think you have to at least give it that we are talking about it and we're really fighting about it, and that like we're like going, yeah, there's problems here, and it's fascinating all the conversations that I've had with that particular film.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I liked it more than most, on my initial watch, but I think, yeah, it might be one oftentimes when I go back to films, they move up the ladder a little bit. I have a feeling this one might be one that falls down a
Yeah.
little bit.
Well, it did for me, so I think it might for you. Yeah.
So let's move on to best documentary feature, and I have to admit to being a terrible Oscar cinephile, and that I haven't seen any of these films yet. I know I think Sugar Cane is available on Hulu, I want to say, and I'm waiting on a DVD of Soundtrack to a Coup d'Etat at the library at the moment. But unfortunately, this is the one category that I've been lacking so far this season. But have you seen any of these yet?
I've seen like 2.5.
Okay,
Like I started Sugarcane, and it's a tough watch
yeah,
too. But it's captivating, and I just couldn't. The funny thing was is that we saw Incident,
oh yeah,
which was a oof,
yeah, that's a tough watch as
oof.
well.
And then yeah, so you're just kind of like, okay, then I I personally kind of went through. It was on Disney Plus, and just kind of went through Sugarcane. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna like
Yeah,
pause and just wait for a bit.
yeah,
But my favorite so far that I really enjoy is Soundtrack to a Coup d'Etat, but because I love
sure,
jazz, I
yeah.
love and it was just a fascinating, again, a story I didn't know. Do you know what I mean? And then just kind of dealing with how jazz kind of helped out a lot of interesting things during that. I can't wait till I want to hear your thoughts, and I'm going to read your Substack article on it when you or your newsletter
Yeah.
if you ever to write on it. But yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on that film. But right now, that's leaning towards my where I want it to go. But I don't know if it's going to win. But that's where I have to still catch up, just like you.
Right. Yeah. And I think if I feel like this group is the toughest to watch of all of the documentary feature nominees over the last several years, at least that I can think of. I'm thinking back. I pulled it up on Wikipedia here. Obviously, we had last year's winner, 20 Days in Mariupol. That's a
Yeah,
tough one. But you also had, let's see, The Eternal Memory. That was not quite. I mean, there's a lot of tough subjects. Couple years ago, we had Navalny. That was a tough watch. But then
yeah,
going back, 21, we had Summer of Soul was the winner. That was a great film. A little bit
yeah.
more uplifting. Obviously, there's some elements there. And then My Octopus Teacher the year before that was the winner. So I don't feel like we have a more lighthearted film in this group, and maybe Soundtrack of a Coup d'Etat is probably the most
The most
lighthearted, if you will.
lighthearted,
But
yeah.
still, obviously, a serious subject there.
It's interesting. A lot of filmmakers who threw their name into the best documentary feature. I think there's a lot of conversation right now about how that wing is just so interested in hard hitting stories. That I like. For example, they were saying Will and Harper is awesome. It's emotional. And piece by piece, kind of. And maybe this is why they didn't nominate it. Piece by piece, kind of blurs the lines of narrative storytelling and documentary filmmaking. But didn't we have a Middle Eastern film that kind of did an animated film that did that a few years back? I forgot the one's that one.
Lee was the yeah.
Yeah, so there's this conversation now where people are saying in on the trades that, oh, they just want to nominate the hard hitting stuff now. Because I thought Will and Harper I thought it was a shoe in because I thought it was really fascinating how celebrity and and identity kind of clash in that story. So yeah, I got to finish my watch of that all of those films just like you.
Yeah, yeah, and I have to call this out as often as I can, but I was, really hoping for a nomination for The Remarkable Life of Evelyn. I don't know if you've seen that on Netflix. It's the story about, this young, Norwegian boy. He's got a muscular disorder, so he kind of retreats into the world of, online gaming, World of Warcraft. He was the yeah, ends up passing away, I think, at the age of about 25. I was fairly young, but then after his passing, his friends from this game just reach out to the family and tell him how his relationships he had built over the years that the family hardly even knew about in this
Yeah.
game. So it's really, really touching story. I think that would have, given at least one, more heartwarming story in this group. So it was again one of my top films of the year, and a little disappointed that it did not get a nomination. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot of the hard hitting films in the documentary category, and we'll see a couple of them in documentary short, which I'm discussing tomorrow as well. So some hard films to watch, but obviously important subjects at the same time, and like you said, some that some folks might not know about. So let's move on to best original score. And you already mentioned it a little bit with Wild Robot earlier. We have again 5 nominees: The Brutalist, score by Daniel Blumberg, Conclave by Volker Bartleman, Emilia Pérez, Clement Ducall, and Camille, Wicked, John Powell, and Stephen Schwartz, and The Wild Robot, Chris Bowers.
Hours. No. It's really interesting to note that Chris Bowers is an Academy Award winner,
Yeah,
but
not for
not for this,
a
not for
soundtrack.
score,
Yeah,
right?
yep.
And I personally, I love soundtracks. Maria always makes fun of me because I would have the Conclave soundtrack on while I'm like relaxing, and she's like, "How can you relax to this?"
Yeah,
But it makes it film scores help me think sometimes, when I'm writing or when I'm cleaning or when I'm doing anything. So, I listen to it. Even films where I'm famously not a big fan of, aka The Brutalist. Even that score has elements of it that I'm just like, okay, this is fascinating. My vote is gonna go to Chris Bowers. I don't know if he'll win it, but I think Brutalist is probably gonna win this. But the main theme of The Brutalist reminds me of this old '60s song by the Associations. It's called "Never My Love." It's a da 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 dun, and it's just I'm like, so I can't get it out of my head that it sounds like this old '60s song. Maybe he meant to do that. I don't know, but I love Conclave's score. And I thought John Powell did a good job meshing what Stephen Schwartz wrote for the musical into his score. And I remember telling Maria back then, because I have a lot of friends. My little sister works in the music industry, and she'd also score some of my films. A friend of mine right now, who I'm doing, he's my music director for a show I'm doing this fall. He's a film composer, and he's doing a symposium down in LA. So this film scores are something that just is part of my life, like in terms of people who I work with and everything. And they all really think that The Wild Robot is the strongest. And it was funny because I was telling my wife that Wicked, I didn't know if it was gonna get nominated, and I knew Universal was, like, fighting to get a nomination for John Powell. I think Chris Bowers deserves, the score here. I think The Brutalist is gonna win it. I think when you see that scene in when and I think Chris Bowers did a breakdown when Bright Bill flies and the way that score builds, it you can't help but be emotional. And I watching Emilia Perez again, it's just an odd score. Wasn't a big fan of the score, and I think and I know we'll talk about it later on with the songs, but it's just now that I'm more aware of what's of some of the faults of that movie. I don't think the score deserves. There's a lot more movies that had far better scores than I think Emilia Perez.
sure. And I think you were right too. I had the same questions about Wicked, and I actually went and looked up the rules, and so it says the according to the Academy rules, a score must be created specifically for the eligible feature length motion picture and comprise a minimum of 35% of the total music of the film. So obviously, the songs that we know from the Broadway show are make up so much of that film. So it's like I said, it's a good job of making sure that there was at least some additional new music in that. Although this does feel a little bit to me like Barbie landing in Best Adapted Screenplay last year. Obviously, already everybody knows Wicked. They know the songs. It feels a little bit kind of like that, and I'm surprised, a little bit surprised we haven't heard some of the same vocal outcries about this that we had last year with Barbie. For me, The Brutalist and Conclave were were good when I was watching them, but they haven't had the same kind of sticking power as the Wild Robot with Chris Bowers. You mentioned his Academy Award win just last year for Last Repair Shop. And he was actually nominated a couple of years ago as well for another short film. So obviously, like to see him win here. I really got my fingers crossed. I'm hopeful that again people are shying away from Emilia Pérez and Wicked and kind of go towards the other three. But I have a feeling that you're right. It's my guess is it's probably going to be Brutalist with a potential long shot of
Yeah,
Conclave.
and I think I mean, but the great thing about Chris Bowers is that he's young, he's got more time. You know what I mean? He's gonna definitely score a lot more. But my favorite score, the one that I still listen to and I keep playing, is the Wild Robot. So, but like I mentioned, Conclave has been airing around this house.
Yeah, and I think in just going back to our conversation about Wild Robot at the beginning with the emotional beats of that story, and for me, that
Yeah,
score just
it does.
crank those up to
It
11
does.
every single time, and it wouldn't have been such a good
Yes.
film without the
Oh,
music.
that's so true. So true.
So that brings us to our final category. We are looking at Best Original Song. Again, 5 nominees from only 4 films. We've got El Mal from Emilia Perez, The Journey from the 6888, Like a Bird from Sing Sing, Mi Camino from Emilia Perez, and Never Too Late from Elton John, Never Too Late.
Anya, it's funny. I just posted 10 snubbed original songs today.
I just saw that about a half hour ago.
Yeah. So I've been listening to a lot. I mean, I love soundtracks. I've been listening to a lot of stuff, and I'm thinking like, wow. I mean, I think there are far better songs this year than than what's been nominated. And I was telling my memory, and I remember when we were watching the nominations being announced. I think the one that got the womp womp reaction was this one, and in terms of all the categories, Marie and I were like, really? Out of all the wonderful songs that came out in last year, these are the 5 you guys picked. I jokingly make fun of Diane Warren having her spot every single year. I do have to admit that I think El Mal is the strongest song in the movie and also the strongest part of the film. I think if there's, if we were to take iconic stills from or iconic images from the film, it's Zoe Saldana in that red suit dancing on top of tables. I think if there's one element of Emilia Perez that's iconic, it's that. So I do understand why El Mal would probably win this too as well. But in my opinion, that is the only really solid song in that film. The opening number was interesting. But other than that, I don't know. Maria likes Mi Camino. I'm not the biggest fan of Mi Camino. And I loved Sing Sing. But I did feel like a Bird was sort of an afterthought, as a song. It was kinda like, "Oh, and there's a song." I'm like, "Oh," during the credits, it didn't really seep in through. I get and you listen to the song and you go, "It makes a lot of sense why the song is beautiful and why it works for the film," but I just felt like it was an afterthought, which I don't think really, especially with songs from Kneecap that are embedded in the story, you know what I mean? Like, the Kneecap in terms of a song, I mean, like, the Sick in the Head is part of the story, it's a character in the film. So, I'm always, like, weary of, like, end credit song nominations because they should be, like, they should have found a way to, like, help out with that, and I think and I know and the reason why I'm talking about this is because I feel like The Last Showgirl, the Miley Cyrus song, is a great idea of what of an end credit song should be, right? It's like, here's the moment, spoiler alert, here's the moment of the end, and then the song starts and you go, "Oh," it then helps us it ushers us out of the movie going, "Oh, that's interesting. There's an interesting thought about what we just experienced," right? If it's gonna be an end credit song. So, yeah, these songs aren't as exciting as I want them to be. It's and the journey is just to me middling Diane Warren. I always joke that she should have won back then for Armageddon, for I Don't Wanna Miss a Thing, for How Do I Live, for all of the famous pop karaoke songs that we sing now. She could have won back then, because those were the better songs. And I think nowadays a lot of her songs are just those 4 chord like it's the same stuff. It sounds just like the same 4 chord progression songs, and I love her, but she hasn't written anything as strong as "How Do I Live" or "I Don't Wanna Miss a Thing." So
Yeah, I wonder if just because she's been nominated so many times and has never won, obviously she got
yeah,
a honorary award a couple of years ago, the Governor's Awards, but I'm just wondering if, okay, everybody might just see these other, obviously they'll see the Amelia Perez, they'll shy away from those, they'll see Diane Warren and be like, all right, let's give it to her.
Yeah.
She's waited long enough, kind of thing. I feel like obviously Elton John's got
Yeah.
2 Academy Awards for songs from
Rocket
Lion
Man, yeah.
King and from the Rocket Man a couple years ago. So again, I feel like that kind of he's already had his due. Let's give it to Diane Warren. I honestly was not familiar with either the songwriters for Like a Bird, but again, I agree with your point on kind of both that and The Journey. They're not integral to the story the way the ones from Emilia Pérez and
Yeah.
especially El Mal are. And absolutely agree. That's probably the best song and the most iconic moment from that film. It's a toss up to me in this one. I really
Me
don't know
too.
what's going to happen here. I have I had if I had to say, it would probably be The Journey, just because of giving Diane Warren or possibly El Mal. Obviously, Zoe Saldana is the kind of the lead in that, but there are a few lines from Miss Gascon, so I don't know if that disqualifies it because she's got
Yeah.
her finger on it a little bit, but
Well, I agree with you, and we'll have to see how that is. That's gonna be an interesting watch.
I know at one point I saw somewhere that they were not going to be doing the performances live this
Yeah,
year, which was disappointing because I always loved seeing those.
me too.
I loved I forget which song it was from. Now I'm blanking on the name of the movie as well, the Disney movie.
Is it Coco? Remember Me?
No, the one was after that with the family.
Oh, Encanto.
Encanto,
Yes.
yes, thank you.
We don't talk
The
about Bruno, which was Disney didn't push that song. They pushed the really
right, they
beautiful
did the other
song.
one, which is actually my favorite song in
Yeah,
that, and I loved seeing that on the stage. But I love seeing the various artists that they bring in.
yeah,
Obviously, I surprised me a little bit because I mean you're going to have Elton John perform live at the Oscars. Why wouldn't you want to have that happen?
yeah.
You've got Zoe Saldana performing live at the Oscars. Why wouldn't you want that? So
Yeah, we'll have to see. Yeah, no, it's funny because my wife and I were doing spring cleaning and I found all the VHSs of like the old Oscars that we
oh yeah.
and I still have a VHS player because I'm an old physical media guy. And we popped on some of the older ones, and it was really fascinating to watch Debbie Allen productions of like Oh Canada, with Robin Williams, or like which I thought was beautiful was the Aladdin A Whole New World production that they
Oh
did.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
beautiful, so and the ones that really fall flat on their face, and you're just kind of like going, why did they decide to, put this on stage? So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see it during the awards ceremony. What is going to happen with these songs?
Obviously, they take time, and that ceremony's already chock full enough, so
Yeah,
that's an easy thing to cut and save a half hour or so. But I'd like to see a couple of these at least
yeah.
performed live. Well, before I let you go, I'm doing a full recap of everything from the Oscars this year, and I want to get your pick for Best Picture. Who do you think is going to win, and who do you think should win for Best Picture this year?
Oh wow. I think who should win is a preferential ballot, right? And I have to admit, again, this is bias because I've worked with the Catholic Church. I think who should win should be Conclave. Just looking back at all of the films, and Maria made it very clear that we're going to watch everything, and having a lot of scenes being replayed for me in terms of writing and all of that, or just looking back at stuff. And I just remembered I think Conclave isn't necessarily the strongest film of that bunch, but I think it should win. I think there's something about it that's well made, and it's just a handsomely mounted film. Sometimes those are the ones where I'm just like, it's gonna be awesome. I would be happy if Nora wins. I wouldn't be, I think Honora is also another great film, and a complete unknown. But I think who should win is Conclave. I hope, and I think who will win because of the guilds and everything it might be Honora. And I'm hoping I'm right about my instincts with Brutalist. Hopefully people. I mean, it seems like people are starting to agree with me, but I have a feeling that might sneak in there. Those are my will and should. I think.
Well, Enrico, thank you so much for coming on the podcast to talk about the Oscars this year.
Yeah.
Remind listeners one more time where they can find your work.
On Substack, I started a newsletter called Director's Notes. It's been a lot of fun, just sort of brain dumping on film and on Substack. So it's Director's Notes on Substack. I think it's filmguy78.substack.com, and they can find me there.
Excellent. And obviously, don't forget to follow the Oscar Project at theoscarproject.substack.com. And if you're listening to this prior to the 97th Academy Awards, you still have time to enter my Oscar prediction contest. Head over to my Substack page and submit your guesses before the ceremony on Sunday. I'll be back tomorrow with another preview episode where Brandon McMurray and I will talk through the free short film categories. Until then, thanks for listening, and I'll see you at the movies.